And we're back with a rematch as old as time itself. Method NA squaring off against Abrakeydabra. Both teams vying for those BlizzCon riches. And of course, if you like to sweeten the pot, be sure to check out the Hoarder Alliance fireworks or the Transmorpher beacons to get some sweet toys and sweeten up that prize pool for the players. I'm Jack, and joining me for this matchup, we've got Zyronic, Nagura, and Mr. Tettleton. And my friends, since our work colleague is on the bench at the moment for that one, we've got Siege Morales coming up on this one, Tettles. We've seen some fun strategies, and we've also seen some good innovation here and there with how they're manipulating ads, how we're focusing on those beguiling mobs, shutting them down at the right moments. It makes a critical difference in a dungeon as trash-heavy as this one.
Yeah, I mean, I think at the end of the day, though, it's still the spotter show. How you control your spotter, how you control all the mobs around the spotter is definitely going to be the name of the game for both of these teams here.
I know, and I miss having the Vengeance Demon Hunter onto that one because it was so much fun to see them, every bit of their utility getting used to their advantage onto that one. I don't think we're going to see that happen, but maybe it starts inspiring some different things into the future. As we're all set, let's take it away. We have seen some innovation by Method NA earlier today. Let's see what they got for us right now in Siege of Morales.
Yeah, so unfortunately, Vengeance Demon Hunter, not something we've seen from Method U earlier. I still kind of believe that the Vengeance Demon Hunter is not worth it. I mean, it looks really beautiful and it's pretty, but I think the setup time that it takes and the fact that no one can DPS while this is happening because else you break the fear might just not be worth it in the end. And we see Method NA and Abra, they're going right now, they're running the exact same comp with the Double Rogues and the Green Rogue, and then we see no Vengeance Demon Hunter, and both of them being Horde as well.
I missed the Purple Rogue already.
Yeah, me too.
Maybe not 3 of them, maybe just 1 of them would be good. I mean, we didn't really get too much into it earlier, but it kind of made sense that Shakib was playing Demon Hunter because, I mean, that's his main on live. He mains his soup shop on Illidan. That's his guy now. So, and he owns too. He's a pumper. So it makes sense that he was the Demon Hunter and Lighty swapped to DK for that dungeon comp. I liked that dungeon comp. Hope we see more of it later on. But this is definitely the comp that they're more practice on for this dungeon. It makes sense that they kind of stick to that comp. There's nothing too super exciting with the affixes that would make them want to change their comp from what they ran in the previous weeks. So it makes sense that they go back to the sort of comfort comp that we see with Double Rogue and Walker. And of course, we have JB back on the rest of Druid. All is right in the world. The sky is back to blue. Pigs are on the ground. And we're kind of progressing what we normally see in this dungeon, pulling the 2 trash packs for the first boss.
Yeah, and one more thing to note, that Shakib actually was playing Vengeance Demon Hunter, right? He was a tank main, and he was playing a lot of Vengeance in Legion, so just going back to that Demon Hunter for Shakib, well, now he's on his Rogue again, no more Purple Rogue, unfortunately, as both of the teams are basically engaging the boss at the very same time. They're so close to one another, as they both were finishing off the trash pack very similarly at the same time, and now engaging the boss. Abrakeydabra using their Bloodlust, while Method NA is holding off on it. I wonder what exactly they're saving their Bloodlust for, because almost all of the teams that we have seen so far either used the Bloodlust for the very first trash pull, or they committed to the boss fight, because after this boss, there's lots of spotter things and just smaller trash groups, so no real big pulls that he can do. So I wonder if Method NA just either forgot about it, or if they have something that we've never seen before right after this.
I love that explanation, spotter things. If you could like take the entire dungeon and put it condensed into 2 words, Siege of Morales would just be spotter things. That's literally what this entire dungeon is.
Should be a t-shirt slogan.
That would be a good one, yeah. Warcraft, get on that. Yes, I mean, like you mentioned, the second this boss goes down, it's all about managing your spotter, making sure that sided artillery is hitting as many mobs as possible. And that's kind of like why we like to talk about the Vengeance Demon Hunter, because it's something that can keep things in place for a long period of time and make sure that your spotter will hit everything and cleave it down for you. It's just an extra added utility tool on top of the toolkits we already have available with monks and rogues. So I like to see that. But like we mentioned before these guys even pulled the boss, it makes sense that they're dealing with a comfort comp. Interesting note from Method NA, they've held on to their Bloodlust. I'm curious to see what they plan on using that. This is a tyrannical dungeon, so not using it on the boss is an interesting choice. It makes sense that they don't really care to use it on this boss because the damage amp on this fight is only 6 seconds. You can't really take full advantage of that with Bloodlust. So I'm curious to see whether they're going to use that to enable some massive pull here right after the first boss, maybe for consistency's sake, or if they plan on using it on Dread Captain to maybe try to one-phase the boss. That'd be pretty interesting as well. We'll have to see how they plan on using that coming forward.
At this point, I almost feel like they literally just forgot. I mean, again, after this first boss, there's just such a long time where you don't even have the possibility to pull a lot of mobs. And even if you do, you have the spotter available to you right after this pull. So it's such a weird thing that they're not using it. Maybe it's really as you said, and they're just saving it for the second boss and get one less intermission phase, which does save you quite a bit of time. So maybe it really is that. As Abrakeydabra finished off the boss slightly earlier than Method NA because they were committing their Bloodlust. So that was the only difference between those two teams at the start. Abra just being slightly faster on the boss because of the Bloodlust commitment. Now we see beautifully done here by Divine Field going in by himself. The spotter doesn't cast their artillery on tanks usually. They are not eligible targets unless they're the only one in combat with the spotter. Then there's no other target to cast it on, and therefore Divine Field does get the artillery on him, and he's able to just finish off the mobs with the artillery himself, as he just also casts the AoE fear to make sure all of the mobs stay in place.
Yep, and of course, the main thing to remember is that the small mobs will get one shot by the spotter. They'll still have to do a little bit of damage to the Wave Shaper as well, or they'll have to commit one more sided artillery to the Wave Shaper. Of course, once all the trash is dead, they can then go ahead and single target down the spotter, unless they plan on using it for something else, but it looks like they're going to go ahead and deal with it on both sides. It almost looked like Abrakeydabra wanted to keep it alive for a little while there, but usually what we see teams do is they go across the water, deal with all of the cutters on their own, as we see Ashine doing right now, proccing his cheat death to it, actually. Little bit dangerous, but he dealt with all the gutters, got all that extra mob count. He actually missed one, but I think that's on purpose because he did proc his cheat death. He didn't want to die to that. So interesting to see whether that's going to cost them mob count. I don't think it will though. Divine Field actually having to go ahead and die on purpose here because he didn't have a shroud to get by. All the rogues, stealth forward, and he couldn't get the leap off to the bridge. So interesting that's going to happen. That's going to cost him a little extra time too because the res from Zamont gets interrupted by a quaking. So that's a little unfortunate. A little 5-10 second death skip turned into 25 seconds because of quaking. That's unfortunate. And we see Method NA already on the boss and already in the first intermission. We're going to see if they plan on using that Bloodlust to try to one phase because it's probably something that's possible, or maybe it's just to guarantee the two phase. I'm not entirely sure. On 18, there's a lot of HP on this boss.
Yeah, so Abra actually losing a lot of time in between the first and the second boss. Method NA already caught up. When both of the teams were finishing off the spotter, Method NA finished off faster than Abra. They were playing all of this trash a lot more inefficient than Method NA did. So gotta watch out for that. And now, not only did Method NA pull the boss first, but they also still have the Bloodlust available. Actually, they used it right now. So it's probably exactly what you said, that they want to get one less intermission phase. So keep an eye on the boss and keep an eye on the intermission phases because Drag Captain Lockwood, it's a timed thing where she will jump away and you get the cannoneers that you have to deal with, and then you get the cannon to shoot her back into combat. But once she's away, she can't die, so she will just stay on 1 HP if you have dots on her or bleeds or whatever. So getting one less intermission is actually a big deal because it takes quite a long time to finish off this cannoneer and get her back in.
Yeah, that was interesting. Of course, you can see that yellow energy bar underneath the boss's HP percentage. Whenever she gets to 100 energy, she starts another intermission phase, so that's how you can tell how much time they have left in each phase. Method NA with the Bloodlust only got Dread Captain Lockwood from about 85% to 40%, so I'm not sure if they're going to be able to do 40% of the boss's HP without Bloodlust. It's going to be very close if they are able to do it, but not being able to skip that one extra intermission is going to be tough for them. On the side of Abrakeydabra, they only got the boss to 49% on theirs, so I think almost certainly they're going to be getting an extra intermission phase. Yeah. So if that Bloodlust play plays off for Method NA, it's going to save them an entire extra intermission worth of time, which is just, it's actually a pretty large gain for them. That's a really safe play. It's cool to see them do that.
Yeah, and it's pretty smart too, because usually when you go into a dungeon, you want to use your Bloodlust as fast as possible, right? Because you want to get it on cooldown and you want to use it again to get the most efficiency out of this. But those MDI teams, they know exactly how long they take, like how long they need in a dungeon. So if they know, no matter what, we're only going to get 2 Bloodlusts, then we don't have to use it to start. We can use it whenever, as long as we get the 2, right? So, thinking about all of the Bloodlust usages and thinking that it actually matters more here, as you can see, we're getting one less intermission. Method NA already done with the boss, so definitely matters for them here.
It's going to be close for Abra. They can pull it off if they get some big burst damage here, but Method NA, they pushed from 39 to 0 at about 80 energy. Abra needs to get some big burst damage, or they're going to have to deal with that extra intermission, and it looks like they're going to get it. That Bloodlust play for sure paid off for Method NA. That's big brain from them, and you can see a little bit of practice and routing went into the thought process for this dungeon, especially this week here. I like to see just little innovations from them. That's really cool to see. And of course, like we mentioned, after the bosses, it's back to dealing with the spotter things.
Yeah, we see the Sparta things unfolding right here. The Emissary of Tides you see in the back is just being rooted by JB. First it was set by one of the rogues, and then it will just be follow-up rooted all the time by JB. The root only lasts 8 seconds on the Emissary of Tide, but it does not have a diminishing return, so you can just constantly reroute it. It does take, root is a cast time, and it takes a while to get the root off. So if there's a big pulls where there's a lot of damage incoming, it can definitely cost you some healing just because you have to spend the time to reroute all the time. But these kind of pulls don't usually do a lot of AoE damage if your damage dealers and your tank dodge everything. So if you dodge the bananas in the 4 and you don't get hit by artillery or slam or anything like that, then there's not that much healing required. You see JB actually just stepping into 2 bananas right as I said that.
Shakib, what are you doing, dude? Those don't give you any potassium. They aren't good for you in the dungeon. Get out of there. That's funny. See, that was a really good close-up POV. I liked that. So yeah, they still got the spotter alive, and they're going to go ahead and skip through here. They have a lot less percentage than they normally do here, I feel like, but looks like they're just going to go ahead and shadow melt everything off and use this new spotter, which is, what we normally see. I wonder, well, they haven't shadow melted everything off yet. I wonder if they're just going to use the double spotters to, yeah, they are Horde, you're right.
Yeah.
I'm just speaking nonsense. It looks like they're planning on using double spotters to deal with all the trash they just ran through. This is also new. We haven't seen this before.
Okay, so we actually did see this before, the first time in the West Cup, but Lighty going down. And that's why I mentioned before that Mythic EU was not doing this strategy. I was saying...
No, they weren't, yeah.
Yeah, they were doing this the first time around in the first cup, but Mythic EU now changed up their strategy to not do this. They're actually just completely changed up because of the plus 18 probably. Nerf actually going down. So this might just be a full team wipe coming in as JB goes down as well. Oh, this is a huge mistake by them because all of the mobs were so low, but they didn't finish off. So that means with the full wipe coming in, all of those mobs are going to go back and they're going to reset. So huge mistake by Mythic NA. Just a lot of time lost. Abrakeydabra, they're not far behind, so at this point they can come back. And yeah, this is something that I saw Mythic EU do this dungeon earlier, and it's like, oh wait a second, they're doing everything a lot slower now because they don't have the raging affix anymore, and raging definitely makes this dungeon a little bit easier just because the spotter actually does increase damage as soon as he's in raging, so he also does more damage to the mobs with the artillery. And then we also went from 17 to 18, so siege just generally got more difficult, even though quaking and volcanic are not necessarily more difficult, but you have less artillery damage and therefore everything just takes longer. So that's why Mythic EU actually did smaller pools instead of this exact pool that we saw from Mythic NA, and it seems like it didn't pay off for them.
It looks like Abrakeydabra doing the same pool, and I don't even know where I am. What year is it? I feel like I've never seen this. This must be. I must have just completely missed it. So that's on me. Whatever. I don't know what to say. I guess I completely missed this strategy because I remember teams doing completely different things. But yeah, Mythic EU must have done this one dungeon and I just completely missed it. But this is not going well again for Mythic NA. Both Shakib and Lighty have gone down to this poll. They don't have a battle rise up for Shakib. You would think that he would want to release, but no, Nerf going down again. This is going to be another full team wipe for them, and this just isn't working out. Whereas on the side of Abrakeydabra, they have the pull figured out. They got it in their first go, and they only have the one other pull left in the dungeon, and they have Bloodlust available for it should they choose to use it there.
This is so bad for Mythic NA. Even with the first wipe, they were still kind of close. If they would have pulled it off the second time right there, right, then they would have been kind of close to Abra still, because they were pulling so far ahead up until this point. So if they would have managed this pull the second time around, it still would have been a close game. But now with the second wipe, 12 deaths, mobs again reset, full HP again. So this is just a huge problem for Mythic NA. Well, Abrakeydabra, they're playing a lot cleaner. You can see they only have 1 death. They did have the slower strategy. They were less efficient. Mythic NA definitely had a more efficient strategy, but just because they play cleaner and safer, it might just pull off for Abrakeydabra as they're dealing with the last few trash mobs here right in front of the next boss.
Yep, and they're doing it pretty cleanly right now. They only have a couple more shots from the spotter in order to get everything down, and then they'll have to cleave down the commanders and the Tides emissaries, but 1 or 2 more spotter shots and they've gotten through all the trash that they have left in the dungeon, outside of the non-spotter killable trash. So very clean execution from Abrakeydabra, and they even managed to save their Bloodlust for the cleave should they choose to use it there. I believe what we see most teams do is cleave down the commanders and the emissaries of Tides with Hadal whenever he respawns, so they have that available for that should they choose to use it there. This was, we saw how poorly the pull can go on the side of Mythic NA, and how the pull will look if you do it perfect from the side of Abrakeydabra. And it's really interesting to see this kind of new Abrakeydabra, because normally when we see these matchups from Abrakeydabra, they would be the team that's shooting themselves in the foot and making mistakes, but it's interesting to see that from Mythic Dungeon. It's almost like Mythic Dungeon and Abrakeydabra have swapped positions from Spring Cup, where Abrakeydabra just playing better. This is, I mean, it's good to see for them as well. Like, they always had a problem with, you know, being able to compete against both Mythic Dungeon and Mythic EU, and seeing them, you know, pull it together in this first dungeon is it's great to see.
Yeah, definitely Abrakeydabra doing a pretty good job so far. They actually choose to finish off the mobs here instead of doing... Oh, Smucker just running into an artillery, almost going down here. Thankfully did survive. But yeah, so they're choosing to play a little bit safer here, just finishing off all the mobs before they engage the boss. As you mentioned, usually some people will, you know, get the commanders, get the spotter, just pull it on top of Hadal and just cleave it all down. But maybe they probably know that they're ahead, right? They probably see on the stream that Mythic Dungeon just had all of those mistakes, have the 14 deaths, and just said, you know what, let's play it safe, let's finish it off, get out of combat, make sure Smucker gets a heal, gets a drink off, sorry, get the mana back, and then we engage the last boss. They still need 1% trash. I do believe they finished off the spotter for Abra, so... At least I haven't seen the spotter around, so...
I saw them kill one of them. They had two. I wonder if the second spotter is still just chilling behind the gate over there, and that's what their last percentage is. But that would be kind of weird as well, because I think it would come through the gate. Eventually, it doesn't... You know, enemy mobs don't care about gates. If you're in combat with them, they'll come wherever they need to come. So, yeah, we'll have to see what they do for that last 1%. I think they have a spotter left, but if they don't, they'll have to backtrack and take care of that. That being said, I mean... The only major difference right now, Mythic Dungeon is not far behind in terms of where they are in the dungeon, and they are committing to the cleave on Hadal, so this is going to be a lot more dangerous for them. I mean, that being said, it's mostly just tank damage, but when all of this residual damage is going out in an 18 tyrannical dungeon, Hadal does a lot of burst damage on the group, but then he doesn't really do much for quite a while until he casts his ability again. So as long as JB is kind of focusing nerf throughout most of this trash percentage, they should be totally fine, no caster curse. But this is a lot of tank damage while the adds are still up here.
I mean, it's definitely a difficult thing to do here. I think this might just be something they have to do. They probably know, you know what, we died. We have 14 deaths. We have to do something here. So let's just pull a boss. Let's try to do it. It's definitely possible. We've seen stuff like this before. But one thing to note, that I'm pretty sure that they're all in combat. I think Mythic Dungeon is in combat with a Void Emissary, because when Lydie and Yoda, they were dying and they walked back to the group, they pulled a Void Emissary, I believe, because I saw the debuff on them, and they're not Night Elves. So if Lydie is in combat with the Emissary, then everyone else is as well, because JB is healing him and therefore gets aggro as well, and I think they're all in combat. So once Hadal goes down and to finish off the spotter, there's no way of JB to get a drink off or for them to, you know, get another potion. The only people to get out of combat are the rogues, so that might be a problem for JB's mana. It is tyrannical, so there's quite a bit of AoE damage. It's usually healable, right? But if you don't get a drink off at all, then that might cause some problems later on for JB.
And it looks like they are going to have to backtrack for that extra mob count, as they are kind of pulling Hadal to the gate where the trash is going to be, on the other, where the trash they skipped previously was. So a little unfortunate miscalculation from them, but they're far enough ahead in the dungeon, both in boss percentage as well as, I believe, an extra minute in terms of deaths. We have 14 deaths to 1, so 65 extra seconds on the board for Abrakeydabra to work with on their side. So a lot of safety for them. They'll probably just deal with, oh, looks like they just have this emissary they can kill pretty easily here for their extra percentage. That should be plenty. And then they'll just move on to the final boss, which they do have Bloodlust available for as well. On the side of Mythic Dungeon, they do have all the trash percentage done, and they are pretty close to finishing off Hadal. But I believe, just you know, where they are in the dungeon, what the boss is tyrannical, so even so it's 30%, it still has several million HP left. Abrakeydabra should get to and engage the final boss before Mythic Dungeon does, and it would pretty much take a full team wipe from Abrakeydabra to give Mythic Dungeon a chance in this dungeon. We have seen, I mean, no caster curse, but we kind of have to talk about it, right? Abrakeydabra has still made those mistakes. They made the mistake against Mythic EU last week, where Zamok ended up going down in that final boss of Shrine of the Storm, and it cost them the dungeon. I mean, that has to be something that's in the back of their minds, right? They have to think, oh, we're in the lead, we have this in the bag, just play safe, don't make any mistakes.
Yeah, I mean, they're definitely a team that can make those kind of huge mistakes, and nerfs are getting to them. We've seen Abra at least in the past, we've seen them, be this team that are just kind of their own enemy, right? They have those mistakes, have a healer go down here, no battle res available, full team wipes on a boss, something like that, especially at the very end, right? They're so close to winning, and then they make some sort of mistake, which actually happened to Mythic NA as well a couple of times, as they were playing against Mythic EU, and they were so close to winning against them, and then something went wrong at the very end. So both Abra and Mythic NA doing those kind of things, so definitely gonna watch out, as Abra really just needs to finish off this boss no matter how fast they are. They could even just play it completely safe and finish off 5 demos probably on each platform, and they will probably still win. I mean, Mythic NA also the last boss now, but 13 dash difference, that's just an insane amount of time. Both teams do have Bloodlust available as well.
I mean, that was not, whatever just happened to Shine there was not good. He got hit by one of the Demolishing Terrors and instantly procced his cheat death, so he doesn't have that available anymore. That's just, maybe they committed to the Gripping Terror a little bit too soon, and extra Demolishing Terror spawn for them, or Tendril rather. But I mean, that's just a little spooky to see that you don't have that cheat death available, and he also gets hit again there for 60% of his HP, so you got to keep an eye out. This is still an 18 tyrannical dungeon. These mechanics do a lot of damage if you don't do them properly.
Yeah, Jay also proccing the cheat death. So now both rogues not having the cheat death available to them, they gotta be careful here, as Mythic NA, they also engaged the last boss. JB looks very fine on mana, so even if he didn't get out of combat at all because of the Void Touched Emissary, then they're still fine, as you can see right now. Smok did proc the staff. Also, one thing to note, that Smok does not have the staff proc, the Shara staff available, while JB does. So they can definitely make use of that later on. Swag going down for Abrakeydabra. They do have 2, so after this rest, they have 1 more battle rest ready and another one coming up. So as long as Smok doesn't die, they still have 2 battle rests available.
And it looks like they commit the Bloodlust for this platform. I would imagine this Bloodlust is purely committed for this platform so that you skip the 3rd Demolishing Terror, because normally you'd have to swap to the 2nd one and then you'll have to kill the 3rd one as well. The Bloodlust allows you to finish off the Gripping before the 3rd Demolishing Terror spawns, which is pretty much one of the checks you want to break at this point. Mythic NA not opting to do that on their side, and they're actually like caught up in terms of progression in this dungeon right now. I mean, this is neck and neck. Of course, the main factor being that Mythic NA has 12 more deaths, which means they have a minute of ground that they have to make up here. It would still require some catastrophe from Abrakeydabra here, but both rogues dropping incredibly low here to what I assume are slams from the Demolishing Terror. That's not what you want to see. This is very shaky from them, and they don't have their Bloodlust available, whereas Mythic NA does.
I think they're actually just really, they're playing really risky, I think, on Abra's side, because they just let 2 demos spawn 2 Demolishing Tentacles, and then they just focus down the Gripping, which is something they don't really have to do, to be honest. I'm not completely sure why Abra is playing this risky when, they have a whole minute difference. You see Mythic NA, they're popping their Bloodlust for the very last Tentacle here. JB still has the staff available as well, so not sure if he's going to use it here too. But again, 1 minute difference. If Abrakeydabra does not make a mistake here, they should be fine.
It looked like Zamok was about to try to walk into the tides to try to proc his staff, and then he realized last second, wait, that's on cooldown, I shouldn't do that, and then he walked out of it. That was, or maybe it was because of the quaking, but it looked for a second there like he was trying to proc his staff. But the Gripping Terror is going down for both teams at the same time. Of course, like we mentioned, the problem is Mythic NA has those 12 extra deaths on the board, so even though the Gripping is down here, Abra's going to have an extra minute of time to deal with this final cannon shot, so they can sit there, they can pretty much take their time to finish this off. I think we saw Shakib miss, or we saw a team in the East Cup miss their cannon shot twice. It was definitely on purpose. More deaths coming out for Mythic NA here, but they do get the final cannon shot off. But because of the extra deaths, this dungeon is going to go over to Abrakeydabra, and a pretty clean run until the end.
Yeah, Abrakeydabra does very well in Siege of Paralysis under this one, taking that game 1, and you're right. It was just them playing their game and not making any of those critical mistakes, and Mythic NA just kind of stumbling over their shoelaces on that one, Tettles.
I mean, it was really neck and neck up until the point where Mythic NA ended up doing that double spotter pull and ended up costing the whole entire dungeon because of just the sheer size of that pull in general. Abrakeydabra had a few mistakes, like that res that they had to have on Divine Field that ended up costing them 25 seconds. I know you guys were talking a little bit about the discrepancies in the 2 Bloodlusts, whether or not you should actually Bloodlust on Lockwood to be able to phase it 1 full cycle sooner. So Mythic NA had a pretty commanding lead up until the point where Abrakeydabra used their lead just gained by Method NA's mistakes to be able to take it. Abrakeydabra, of course, using their spotter in a pretty decent way in order to be able to deal with the Hadal trash. Look at all those volcanoes spawning too, like, good grief. The sheer amount of trash spawning all those volcanoes could actually be dangerous, but for players of this caliber, this shouldn't be an issue. Something that was also interesting, I think they actually missed count because of one of the gutters. So basically the gutters will be in combat with the footmen, and if you actually tag the footman first, it will instantly kill the gutter, but unfortunately it won't give you count for that gutter. So I assume Abrakeydabra probably missed their count for that, so that cost them a lot of time, unfortunately.
They definitely did miss one. Because remember, Ashine parked his cheat death and ended up leaving before. He left one gutter there for sure. I remember that for a fact.
Interesting. I thought it might have been something with like Sunfire actually not hitting the right mob or something along those lines onto that one. But you mentioned Method NA had that double spotter pull, and that was their feast or famine. That was, they're kind of all in their, in their hat, the ace in their sleeve or whatever you want to call it, right? And it just didn't go well. It didn't really turn out onto that one. Let's break that down a little more.
Yeah, so we have a Method Dungeon tools over that. So basically they use this spotter that spawns near Lockwood, and they ended up like just bringing it through them with them throughout the whole entire rest of the dungeon. And then they bring it over to this area like right before you actually make it near Hadal's room, and then they end up pulling all of this trash all the way up here into this like area that we actually see a lot of people end up pulling the Hadal trash into, and they end up like ring of piecing inside of this doorway over here. This is fine because it gets the mobs grouped up for both of the spotters, and then if this pull is done cleanly, then you actually have the second spotter from this archer pack here being able to drop that artillery barrage on top of all of those adds and mobs and kill them down very quickly. Unfortunately, as we can see in the clip, Nerf actually ends up going down, which ends up costing them the whole entire pull there, because basically with a pull this size, once your tank actually does end up going down, even if you do have the battle res available, the pull is pretty much dead in the water just as it ends up standing. So you actually do see Lighty there dropping his Ring of Peace. You see all of those mobs getting knocked back. Ring of Peace, of course, has like a target cap, but it's not significant. It's not significant enough to where that this pull would actually get affected. It looks like one of the spotter, like the artillery barrage, wasn't dropped in like an okay spot relative to where Nerf was. So most of the mobs are still really high on their HP, and then the snipers just end up like shooting everybody, end up taking people down. They end up blowing their battle reses. Nerf, of course, ends up dying. The pull, if done successfully, would have been amazing, and they would have actually gotten a significant amount of trash count. I think it's somewhere in the range of like 20%. But unfortunately for them, it ended up like ending the run. Like basically your run is dead at that point, especially if you're doing a pull that size.
And it also goes to show the preparation of how much these guys have to push themselves in order to beat other teams like Method EU or even Abrakeydabra now after seeing their performance on this run. So we'll be taking a quick break before we go into our next round and see how Method NA bounces back. Next game is going to be Freehold on the other side of this break. Method NA is down 1 against Abrakeydabra, who works their magic and Borealis. Now we're going to have to see if Method NA is going to be able to come back as we get started with Game 2 here on the Freehold.
Wow, 59% for Abra?
How often is
the EU people
team losing a vote?
Yeah, that is wow.
That's impressive.
To be fair,
That's a for sure. That is a
1, 2, 3.
Oh wait, I missed it.
1, 2, 3.
There we go. Did it. Perfect.
Beautiful.
All right. I'm actually really interested to see if either of these two teams picked up on what Method EU did, because I feel like their massive pull was a really good adaptation to what the tyrannical dungeon wants you to do. And if you can get, they got a quarter of their mob count done in one pull, and it looks like Method NA is already doing something very similar. This is, once again, a very massive pull from them. So we're going to have to see if they're able to pull this off. I mean, the person to look here is that the Unholy DK. He's going to do a massive amount of damage here, even committing their Bloodlust to it. Over to 750,000 DPS. I mean, if they're able to finish this off and have good sanguine management, this is going to be great from them. But so far their sanguine management is good. They have a couple crack shots that are sitting inside the sanguine. That one crack shot that just came into the frame did heal to full in the back there, but that should be totally fine. I mean, that's something that I'll take in terms of this pull. The main danger of the pull is almost all gone with these enforcers at very low, and once the enforcers are dead, they should be able to deal with these crack shots pretty clean. So, I mean, I think that's already an advantage for Method NA here.
I mean, Abra did do the same pull, but they had some struggle, right? Because they had Swagfist actually go down on the skip, because he did Shadow Melt, but he didn't really get it off properly, so his Swagfist went down. They had to commit a full rest coming back up. So, some problems for Abrakeydabra here again. I think something like that happened earlier as well. They definitely need to make sure that they finish up, they don't make those small little mistakes, because just having one rest is not going to be the end of the world, but if you need the mass rest off, it's still just going to cause so many problems. And I was wrong, so Abra actually does have only 18%, while Method NA has 23%. So Method NA definitely doing a bigger pull here, the same pull as Method EU did earlier, right? So insane pull by Method NA, and they also engaged the boss slightly earlier, I believe, so definitely advantage for Method NA. Abrakeydabra, though, they were saving their bloodlust for the boss, so they will have more boss damage, they will finish it off faster, and they also pull some trash on top of it. So I believe that the missing percentage between Abra and NA will be this trash that they pulled on top.
Yeah, and we'll have to see if the Bloodlust with the Cleave is going to put, if they're going to be pretty much neck and neck coming out of it. Because right now, I mean, the Cleave with Bloodlust should be efficient, but they are going to lose a little bit of single target damage once that Bloodlust runs out. On top of that, there's a big chance if they don't manage their knockbacks properly, that like we see right there with the Corsair, that they're going to get some healing off. That's pretty much worst case scenario. I think the only thing that would possibly be worse is if the boss starts casting as the mobs die and the boss gets healed. But as you can see, in terms of strategy, they're pretty much at the same point with a tiny, like almost negligent advantage for Abrakeydabra. And I think it's important to mention here that we kind of overplayed a little bit of what Method EU did. This is actually the same mob count that Method EU meant to pull. They actually accidentally stayed in combat with the original 3-pack they pulled before the stairs. And the fact that they were able to still pull that pull off with the 3 extra mobs, yeah, it just goes to show, how good they actually are as a team. So this is kind of what Method EU meant to do, and to see both Method NA and Abrakeydabra pull it off in their own separate ways is it's pretty good to see.
Yeah, it's really cool to see, especially because we have Freehold switch to Tyrannical, right? And most of the dungeons stay the same, they stay 45 throughout all of the season, but we changed it up a little bit for the summer season, and Freehold was Tyrannical before, and now we switched to, was 45 before, and now we switched to Tyrannical. And if you have those huge changes, then you need to adapt your strategy, because you can't just play a 45 strategy on a Tyrannical. You're going to be way too slow, because Tyrannical does allow you to pull way more trash than 45, of course. So adapting the strategies for both Abra and Method NA, very nice to see. I mean, in the end, they could have watched Method EU and just copied the strategy, but I don't think such a strategy change is as easily copied, because it's a pretty huge pull, right? Something that we see from Method EU. You can't just, practice one time and then just do it in cut play. You definitely need to practice those kind of pulls more often to make sure that it works properly, because, if it only works one time, then you don't really want to pull it off in cut play. So definitely shout out to both those teams for adapting it a little bit. Abra finishing the boss slightly earlier than Method NA, though.
Yeah, I mean, based off of the boss damage that we saw earlier on, I think that was going to be the case. They were a little bit ahead the entire time, just because it makes sense to use Bloodlust on a boss in a Tyrannical setting, especially Skycap and Crag, which has that ridiculous single target damage with the bursting shots as well. You could see the monks dropping to 10% HP, the rogues dropping to 10% HP every time they got shot. It's just an incredibly dangerous boss, and I'm kind of glad that they have these affixes, because if it was something like Grievous, we would be seeing people go down on that boss every single time we were in this dungeon. So a little bit lucky for them with the affixes. Maybe not so lucky next time. Hopefully, we'll see.
What about that quaking? Wouldn't that be awesome?
Ooh, that's just mean.
That is really mean.
Maybe quaking and Grievous at the same time. That'd be fun.
Yeah. Just get straight up one shot by a shot plus quaking. It's like, what are you gonna do?
Well, there goes my cheat death, guys. Sorry. So I'm interested to see here, because like we mentioned, it is Tyrannical. These trash mobs aren't as dangerous. They should be doing massive pulls, especially with the Unholy Decays. And we see, I believe this is 4 packs worth of mobs for Method NA here. They're doing a much bigger pull than what Abrakeydabra is doing. If they can pull this off, this will give them a very firm advantage in the dungeon.
Yeah, you can see just how many packs there are on top of each other. There's so much control that you require for these mobs too. These mobs maybe not as difficult as mobs in Kragma's room in Underrot, but there's still a bunch of things they need to make sure they do. You want to make sure that you interrupt the cast, the frontal frost blast, and then you also want to make sure that you deal with the fixates properly. And you can see the whirlwind as well that some of the Buccaneers here do. You saw a Typhoon come out because of the Sanguine, and that's going to be the important part as well when you do those kind of huge pulls. Not only do you need to control all of the mobs themselves, but you want to make sure that you deal with Sanguine properly, because even if you do a huge pull, if the mobs heal constantly, then you might as well just pull it in 2, right? Because if they heal to full HP, what's the point in pulling them at all? So they want to make sure they handle that properly with all of the Typhoons and the Ring of Pieces that they have. Abrakeydabra, they're engaging the boss on the other hand.
I mean, outside of one mob, that pull from Method NA was almost perfect. I think one mob
that was really good.
20 or 30%, and that was it. I think the most important mechanic to look at in that particular pull are the scrappers. They do that blind rage mechanic where they'll fixate any random person in the group and do melee, and they'll try to melee them. And something that that really helped him out there is both of the fixates went on Lighty, on one person, and he was able to just commit both his Touch of Karma and his Dampen Harm to that. So none of the other DPS had to worry about kiting around. They could just full on DPS, and that was just really fortunate for them as well. They didn't use their stun or anything at that point, so he was able to kite that around. This is kind of spooky for Abrakeydabra with their boss positioning here, because Raul's healing in that Sanguine. He's still full HP because of it. They've got to really find a spot where they can actually do damage to him, because he's just bathing in it right now. This is not.
This hurts to watch.
Not good.
No, the Sanguini just healing roll all the way to full HP. I was staring at Abra because they were pulling a lot of trash. They were pulling the Rat Pack on top of the boss. So he's like, and I was like staring at it, like, is this gonna work out? This seems very sketchy. And Divine Field was tanking the bosses in between the Sanguine. They were just sandwiched in between there. And then Raul just steps into the Sanguine, stands still, and just starts casting, and he does not move. So this is why you don't really want to play trash on top of this boss, just because those bosses, they constantly charge around. They're very hard to move because they constantly cast abilities. So you can't just move them immediately. So huge mistakes by Abrakeydabra, losing quite a lot of time by the Sanguine. While Method Nate pulled the boss a lot later, and you can see the difference in HP, right? Method Nate is ahead on the boss, even though they engaged it way later.
And they're also doing a fantastic job of dealing with the brews. I've seen at least 2 of the bad brews go into the boss and deal damage to the boss as well. They're just playing this fight to perfection. And I think that's what's great about the different pulls that they use. Method Nate pulled off a massive pull, but it was nowhere near the boss room, so they don't have to worry about any of the Sanguine possibly ever healing the boss, because it's literally outside of the arena. It couldn't happen. That's just good foresight and good planning from them. Abrakeydabra, I mean, they might have been able to pull something off where they killed the rats on the side rather than right in front of the boss, or maybe they've had strategies where they kill them in a certain portion of the room, because there's no Eudora to worry about. The boss isn't going to, tell it jump to one random section of the room. There's no RNG here. You can focus on, you can place the bosses where you want to place them. So maybe that's just unfortunate Sanguine placement from them. Maybe they do a better job stacking that in practice. A little bit unfortunate to see from them. But Method and Age is going to go ahead and pull right into another massive AoE pull here.
Yeah, you can see earlier JV probably stealthed ahead already and made sure the RP is started, because there's an NPC you need to talk to. It takes a while, and then the pick spawns and you need to click it. So usually what we see teams do is the healers actually just stealth ahead, make sure they talk to the NPC just to speed up this roleplay. As you already see the pick right here, as Shakib picked it up, and now we're gonna see Ludwig spawn as they finish off this Emissary of the Tides in this pool, which definitely makes this pool a lot more difficult than it seems, just because none of those mobs are actually CCable. There's no AoE stun or interrupts that he can pull out, so definitely gotta watch out, as you also see the fixate on Yoda kiting the mobs.
Yeah, fortunately Shattering Bellow isn't really gonna do anything to anyone in the group except for JB if he's casting something. Something else interesting is Lighty's done like literally no damage this entire pull. I wonder what the deal is. Oh, JB going down. Fortunately, they're running an EK, so they have a battle res, so it's not that big of a deal. But I mean, that's just a battle res down for they'll have another one coming up in 30 seconds, but that's not great. You don't want to see your healer go down there. It's a little unfortunate. Fortunately, not that big of a deal. They should have that battle res up when they need it, should they need it, coming up soon. But for the most part, the trash pack is dealt with. Now I'm interested to see if they're going to go right into the boss here, or if they're going to backtrack and do another trash pull, so they have time for the Sanguine in the middle to go away. Shakib, you got to stop. Oh, Shakib.
No.
That's going in the trial thread, dude.
Shakib drunk again. Unbelievable. Method, though, still very far ahead. They still have the other battle rest available. They just came back up to make sure Shakib drunk is alive again. They need to finish up Ludwig here to be able to get to Trollpack. And yeah, they're pretty far ahead compared to Abrakeydabra. They're also on Abra's side. They finally managed to finish off the second boss, and they're now also fighting Ludwig. But still, Method and A finished off Ludwig already. They're on 55% trash. They also have the Bloodlust available. I assume they want to save it for the last boss, though. Something we've seen before by Method EU, where you just engage the boss, you pull a lot of trash on top of it, make sure Bloodlust makes it a lot easier, especially on the tank as well. And now we see some more trash pulls coming out of Method and A. I wonder if they're gonna pull Tropic as well.
Yeah, it'd be really interesting to see them do that because they have to really make sure they're dealing with their Sanguine placement. Like they want to make sure that they only kill the mobs after one of the whirlwinds so that he doesn't have any cast sequences that he goes through. They have to know exactly how the boss's cast sequences work because if the boss starts casting an ability as you're killing mobs and you don't have a knockback available for them, you're going to spawn Sanguine right under the boss and you're going to heal the boss. Fortunately, they have the Ring of Peace, and I think they still have the knock from JV as well should they need it. So it looks like they're doing a totally fine job of dealing with Sanguine so far. Only have 3 mobs left to worry about, and then once those 3 mobs are down, they can just position the boss in a place where they don't have to worry about it at all.
Yeah, that's also the beauty of a DK, right? If there's some sort of mob that is about to die on the boss, you can just have the grip come in, make sure it dies far away from the boss. There's also other utilities that they have available to them, though. They also have the Typhoon from the B, and they also have the Ring of Peace. Now, the good thing about the boss not actually being displaceable with a Ring of Peace or Typhoon is that you, instead of waiting for the Sanguine to spawn and then Typhoon the boss out of it, which obviously doesn't work, you want to wait until the mobs are low and then you Typhoon them or Ring of Peace them away before they die, just so they pull spawn away. So you need to think ahead a little bit, but those teams obviously are doing that. That's why you can see Trothek not healing. Well, Mythic NA is doing that. Abrakeydabra, not really. We've seen the bosses before heal quite a lot. So they want to make sure that they play a lot better with the Sanguine this time around because Abra also pulled mobs on top of Trothek. So they want to watch out that Trothek does not heal.
Yeah, I mean, we're seeing a similar strategy from Abrakeydabra here where they pulled a lot of trash on top of Trothek, and they're doing something similar where their tank is kiting it around while he's whirlwinding so they don't have to worry about Sanguine. I'm sure they'll have the Ring of Peace and knock here from the Druid as well should they need them as the boss does his cast sequence. We'll have to see. Hopefully they'll come out here because it'd be really unfortunate to see a boss heal again for Abrakeydabra twice in a dungeon. But they're just doing some kiting around. Divine Field, master kiter, very good at doing it. We've seen him do it in previous MDIs as well as this one, so very good at doing his job. And no healing on the boss for Abrakeydabra, so good execution from them. They're just 20% behind on the boss with pretty similar trash count. That's just going to be like one mob hit by the cannon barrages on Harlan Sweet, so it's not going to be that big of a difference. That's the thing to look forward to, though, on Harlan Sweet is how well can these groups deal with the Sanguine when they're killing them with the cannon barrage on Harlan Sweet, because that can be a big problem.
Yeah, definitely. There's also one thing to note that those teams, they're still pretty close. Even though Abra, they are behind, right? But any sort of mistake by Mythic NA, any sort of, healer dash or Sanguine healing on something should keep going down, as it just happened right now, without the battle rest available, actually. Just exactly what I've been talking about. Like, they need to... this might just be the way for Abra to get back into this game. They're both on 3 deaths now, so there's no difference in death counters. We both have 15 seconds, and now... this is a tyrannical setting, so Trothek with only 2 DPS, it's going to take them a little bit longer. Of course, they're going to be able to finish it off, but it's still going to cost them a bit of time, and maybe Abra can actually catch up because of it.
Yeah, they're definitely going to catch up a little bit. It still should go down first for Mythic NA just based off of, math and damage stuff, because 2 DPS with that 10% versus 3 DPS 30%. It should die first for Mythic NA, but...
Can you calculate this?
Nope, not going to do it. I can look at my phone and do the calculations if you want to
yes,
talk,
please.
but no. The Mythic NA should definitely kill the boss first, but this is what's going to let Abrakeydabra back into the game for sure. It's going to be a big execution check on Harlan Sweet, who can deal with the trash and the cannon barrages better. And I think that's going to be fun watching this because, these teams have both had little hiccups all the way throughout the dungeon, and I think the Harlan Sweet cannon barrage is probably one of the more difficult maneuvers to execute in the dungeon. So I don't know. It might be in the back of their head a little bit as they move on to the final part of the dungeon, knowing they have to play perfectly if they want to finish this one off.
Yeah, and Mythic NA, no battle rest still available. It's also, they're not going to get one later on either. There's the cooldown is way too long on that one. Abra also having Swagfist die here. They have a battle rest available. They probably don't want to commit it just because Trothek is so low. But now, Abrakeydabra, 5 seconds more on those death timers because they're 4 versus 3.
Another one.
Shine also going down at the very end, so 10 seconds difference now. This is something that can't really happen to Abra on such a close matchup between those two. Abra is 2% trash ahead, but that's really not going to make a difference at all just because of the artillery of the last boss. Mythic NA, they're already about to pull Harlan Sweet. Now, if Mythic NA does not make any sort of mistakes, they should be the one finishing this earlier, but again, no battle rest, so they want to make sure they play this very cleanly.
I feel like Abrakeydabra just gave back the advantage to Mythic Dungeon that Mythic Dungeon just lost. I mean, they just traded mistakes. That was, I mean, really unfortunate. And right at the end of the boss, too, at like 3%, that's really unfortunate. However, Mythic Dungeon already popping their Bloodlust on this first AoE pull. We're going to have to see how they manage their Sanguine here, because technically we don't really see that many deaths to this pull. This is usually where the tank pops all of his cooldowns, and as long as the Unholy Decay is able to pump out massive damage here, they should be fine. He's not doing quite what I would expect from an Unholy Decay on this pull. However, over on the side of Abrakeydabra, we have 2 more deaths to the Ravager skip from Divine Field and Dr. J. Just more personal mistakes coming out of them here. This is not stuff you want to see from, a team that's trying to claw their way back into the top seeding for BlizzCon.
Yeah, definitely huge mistakes. Again, I feel like Abrakeydabra had way too many skipping mistakes. We saw earlier at the start of the dungeon, Swagfist going down because I'm not sure if he wasn't in a shroud or he didn't get the shadow melt off. Either way, there was some sort of mistake with the skip, and these things just cost you a lot of time, right? You get the deaths with the 5 seconds punish, and then you also need to cast the Mass Rest, which also takes quite a lot of time to cast the full Mass Rest. So just those tiny little mistakes, they add up, and it's going to cost you too much. Too many mistakes by Abra here with the 7 deaths now, 20 seconds difference now on top of just being behind in general. Now Mythic Dungeon doing a pretty good job so far dealing with the trash. They still need 17%, so they need to put some more trash on top of Harlan Suite, but they seem to be dealing with it pretty well. There were some small mistakes I saw earlier where JB was targeted by the artillery, but he wasn't actually standing on top of the boss, so he wasn't really damaging them. But still, I mean, they're pulling the rest of the mobs here. Want to make sure that they deal with it really well, and want to make sure they're not healing Harlan Suite with their Sanguine.
Yep, they were waiting for that 60% phase transition where instead of one person getting targeted by Cannon Barrage, now everybody gets targeted by the Cannon Barrage. But I mean, they've just been doing so much AoE damage here that the trash is almost all dead before the Cannon Barrage even hits. So really well dealt with trash once again from Mythic Dungeon. Harlan Suite getting a tiny bit of healing off, but in the grand scheme of things, it shouldn't affect them too much. They still have that 20-second edge over Abrakeydabra that they have to deal with. I mean, they can't afford for any more. Any more healing would definitely, put them behind in this dungeon. So we'll have to see if they, are able to cleanly deal with that. Abrakeydabra still has more trash to deal with. They still have 1 more trash pack to deal with. 2 more probably to deal with, whereas Mythic Dungeon just has that 1. They could opt to do maybe a Ravager pack plus a small amount of trash with a Cannon Barrage. I'm not quite sure exactly what they plan on doing, but this is a lot closer than it seems, to be honest here, because any one small mistake could spell disaster for that particular team. And Abrakeydabra going for the second trash pull here. Looks like they're doing fine right now. Is the boss? No, the boss got. Oh, this boss is healing. That boss has got 15% of worth of healing off. That's a nail in the coffin, I feel like.
Abrakeydabra, I feel like we've seen them struggle before with Sanguine. We talked them up. We said, you know what, Divine Field, he has so much experience with tanking in the past and in Legion already. He knows exactly how to deal with Sanguine, right? But now we see them struggle so much in this dungeon where Harlan Suite, healed to 70%. You just can't have that on a tourniquet setting. And then I do remember in the past where they're playing, I think it was in the spring season, where they also just struggled so much with Sanguine. I believe it was in a Taldasar or something like that, where the mobs would just constantly heal. So definitely huge mistakes coming out of Abrakeydabra here. This is something that you just can't recover from. And let's be honest here, Mythic Dungeon, they only had 3 deaths, but they were really not playing as clean as we see them play in other dungeons. So there was a chance for Abrakeydabra to win this, and they just kind of threw it, right? They had way more mistakes than Mythic Dungeon, playing a lot cleaner, having, not completely sure, I think strategies were very similar. I don't think one was a lot faster than the other. I think they were pretty similar. Maybe Mythic Dungeon is a little bit better, but yeah, that's something you can't make those many mistakes if you're Abra.
For a team of their caliber, you definitely cannot, and it allows Mythic NA to stay on in this upper bracket and push us on into a Game 3, their victory under the Freehold. And as you mentioned before, Abrakedabra's been their own worst enemy a number of different times. And you're having the boss heal by 30, 40%, something like that at the very end. You're racking up all of those deaths to get them started before they even got to the end boss. And that one settles just too nasty and you can't have it.
I think Zyro described it best as trading mistakes. Mythic NA and Abra just end up trading mistakes across like the whole entire game. Abra ends up making some uncharacteristic errors with a bunch of their skips. Like, why are they losing like 2 or 3 people every single time they end up using a Shroud skip? It's like so random that they end up having these mistakes. And these are like mistakes that end up costing you like 20 to 30 seconds per, because you end up having to cast that mass res. You have to make sure that you actually end up getting in position. Plus you have the 5 seconds on the death timer. So these are just like cumulative errors. Method NA has some errors of their own too. With like this really big pull into Ludwig, JB actually ends up getting sniped by the turtle shell. It doesn't end up actually costing them anything, but it does end up costing them the battle res, which will, whenever Shakib actually ends up getting killed on Trothak, that ends up costing them a sizable amount of time and puts Abrakeydabra in a position to where they would have been able to actually take the match had they not had those issues with their death run towards Harlan and ended up healing the boss like 40% with Sanguine. Making sure that you end up utilizing Ring of Peace on Harlan's suite to make sure that all the trash gets off of it is very important because Harlan cannot be knocked. So Ring of Peace and Ursal Vortex are very important tools that you should be utilizing for those kind of things.
My heart kind of hurt when I saw JB get harpooned into Turtle Shell, into Cleave from all the other melee. Been there on that one.
Yeah, that's very, very unlucky, unfortunately.
And you hate to see it. But you know what doesn't have harpoons? Shrine of the Storm, which is going to be our game 3. So you're not going to want to miss this one between Abrakeydabra and Mythic NA. We'll be right back. Mythic NA and Abrakeydabra are tied up as we're getting ourselves ready for game 3 right now in Shrine of the Storm.
All right, so Shrine, we've seen lots of teams make huge mistakes in this dungeon, but we've also seen some pretty beautiful runs in Shrine before. So we'll see what Abra and Method NA have here for us. As the first pool, pretty important. We've seen teams before just have complete wipes, wasting their bloodlust, just losing almost everything just in this very first pool. So both teams are looking to do the same thing, both running down, jumping onto this lantern here, snapping all the mobs on top.
I mean, Shrine of the Storm, when it comes to a dungeon, dungeon routes in particular, this is one of the more difficult dungeons in terms of routing, in terms of, mechanics you have to deal with, in terms of just boss damage. Tyrannical Shrine of the Storm is nasty in general, and on top of that, you have to make sure you're dealing with all of this trash throughout the entire dungeon, and it's bolstering on top of that. I mean, if these teams want to win this series, they're going to have to show absolute masterful execution of the dungeon. Otherwise, why do you deserve to be in the grand final, right? So they have to play. Both of them have to play a lot better than what we've seen out of either team in the first 2 matches, and this is a perfect dungeon for them to kind of face off in.
Yeah, most definitely. I mean, this is the last game, right? Best of 3, 1-1, which we don't see that often, right? We see a lot of 2-0s this time around, so having those kind of close game, very interesting to watch. Now, Method NA dealing with this pool a lot faster than Abrakeydabra. Abra is struggling a little bit with bolstering, to be honest. I mean, look at those mobs. They're all bolstered. You can see they still have pretty high HP, but they finished off the rest of the mobs already. So definitely not having very good bolstering management at all on Abra's side. Well, Method NA already done. See, here you can actually see the difference in bolstering. You can see how much faster you can be if you do it properly.
Where's Windspeaker going right now? The Windspeaker just ran up towards the boss. Oh, Nerf just pre-pulled it. That's next level. I haven't seen that from any team yet, I don't think.
They already did this with Method U did this, right?
Did Method U do the same thing?
Yeah.
I didn't see them pre-pull. I thought they pulled it with the boss. I didn't see them pre-pull it while they were finishing off the rest of the trash. So, new for me. Maybe I'm going to count it as new because it's new for me.
This is really smart,
it can be old for you. I mean, it's a smart strategy, right? Because you can pre-set up the haste buff when the boss spawns. That's just pre-thinking. That's really good from them. You don't have to wait for the first haste buff to spawn.
And it's about bolstering too, right? Because there's initiates, so you don't have to deal with the apprentices because you just set them off. And then the one rogue tricks the initiates, tricks Haldis, sorry, and the other rogue just reposts and tanks off the initiates just to make sure none of the rest of the mobs are getting bolstered, and you still have the pre-haste as well. So just very smart play by Method NA here coming out. Abrakeydabra, on the other hand, they finally managed to catch up as well to the boss. They are committing their bloodlust here, while Method NA is holding onto their bloodlust. Not completely sure what exactly they want to use it on later. Maybe they just want to save it for the intermission to have it a little bit safer. But we'll see what they do. Well, Abra, I don't see Haldis anywhere. So they definitely do not copy this kind of Method EU strategy that we've seen yesterday. They didn't do the set. They didn't pull the initiates either. So I wonder if they have a different plan in mind.
But they are kind of keeping up on the boss because they did commit their bloodlust to this pull. So they did have that 40 seconds of haste, whereas, Method NA pretty much got a bloodlust from having the Haldis run up most of the time. That being said, I mean, Method NA, without the Bloodlust, is going to end up phasing before Abrakeydabra very slightly. And I mean, we don't tend to normally talk about this phase too much because usually it's something that the teams don't wipe to, but we saw a death to it and a wipe to it earlier today, so these Aqualings are pretty important. You have to make sure you're in melee range of them or they'll start casting, you know, water bolts at people that do a lot of damage. It's much better to eat the melees to the face than take the water bolts. So you see them split up around the room to cleave everything down. And, you know, they only have one Aqualing left. They've done a pretty good job of dealing with this phase so far. They're going to get through it probably a lot faster than Abrakeydabra did, just purely because of the cleave they got at the start on those front two Aqualings. So just good execution, and on top of that, they had the rune for the entire phase too. So a lot of extra haste on the entire group. Just pretty solid execution and everything from Method NA right now. And I think they're going to end up bringing these two apprentices to cleave on top of the boss. Hopefully kill the boss first, so they don't end up bolstering the boss as well. But no, this execution is very solid. We're seeing something similar from Abrakeydabra, where they're going to bring in the Shrine Templar as well as these 3 attendants on top of the boss as well. So similar pull styles coming from both teams. I think Method NA is a little more difficult. They ended up pulling in those same 4 mobs as well, so they got 6 mobs on top of the boss that they're going to be cleaving down. And yeah, I mean, similar pulls from both teams. This is spooky. 6 mobs on top of the boss.
Yeah, this is really spooky for both of those teams. You can see Shakib proccing that cheat death actually, and again, we're in a bolstering setting, right? So you do not want to kill any of those mobs before you finish up the boss. So that's why they pulled them at the very last end. But you see, Aquaseer actually getting bolstered on Abra's side here. He's still on 2%. If you bolster him super high, it might just... Okay, there we go. They finished off Aquaseer, but they definitely did bolster him a little bit before he went down. So good job on them to still be able to finish it off. But again, Abra just showing that they're just not dealing with the bolstering really well. Method NA just having much better bolstering management, just being superior in that way. Abrakeydabra now, let's see what they do. Okay, so they just completely skip Helldis, it seems like it. They might just Shadow Melt off some of the Void Emissary, we'll see. But it seems like Abrakeydabra has a complete different strategy to whatever we've seen before. Method NA definitely doing something similar that we see from Method EU. Smok actually going down. They do have a DK, which also we haven't mentioned, right? DK is not something we usually see in Shrine except in the Eastern region because it's bolstering, so it doesn't really make much sense. But now a Shine going down as well. They don't have a Battle Rust ready. This might just cost them a lot of time. I
mean, they're committed at this point. They can't leave at this section because there's no way for the TK to get back unless he has to commit an invisibility potion. And this is an interesting pull for Method NA, committing their Bloodlust right here on top of all of these apprentices. This is interesting because where we saw Bloodlust pop before was on the Guardian Elemental. So this is a lot of mobs. There's like 10 mobs in here. So as long as they get their AoE CC down properly and they don't take too many of the Void Emissary ticks, they should be totally fine here. This is just mostly tank damage. There's a little bit of magic damage coming out from the Gale Collars as well that cast that, I believe it's the Gales. I'm not sure exactly what the cast is called, but it's a little bit of magic damage to the group as well, but it's also interruptible. On top of that, they really just kind of want to AoE stun or knock back these Whirling Slams that provide area of denial on the ground so that the melee can get full uptime. But this is, I mean, the main thing to look for at this point is bolstering. Everything's pretty low. As long as they're able to keep even cleave down, this pull should be good. I mean, that's the first time I think I've seen that particular version of that pull with the Void Emissary, and it looks like it went perfectly for them.
Yeah, one more thing to note is that I saw something very interesting come out of Abra. A very small interaction here by Smok. He actually is running Mass Route, and they were pulling the Initiates to be able to get past there, but instead of just pulling them all the way, Smok was just mass rooting them in the back, and you can see it is on cooldown again. So he was going back, making sure the Initiates are mass rooted because you don't want to deal with them right now because they bolster. So you definitely do not want to kill them because they have way less HP than any of those other mobs. So just having that mass root here in the back seems pretty smart by Abrakeydabra here, just having a little bit of a strategy change. And I like both of these strategies coming out of Method NA and Abra just being a little bit different here. I still do prefer the way Method EU dealt with this earlier. It seemed just very clean, very efficient how they did it with the whole snapping on the lantern. But I do like the innovation here by both of those teams. And I just like seeing different strategies and different things and not just, you know, straight up copying someone else. So I do appreciate both of those strategies from Method NA and Abra.
This is a very weird pull from Abrakeydabra. They've got Runecarver Sorn in there. It looks like they're going to move him out just so they can AoE all this trash down and not bolster him. I think we've seen this before as well, but this is, I mean, this is going to take a little while because they're going to have to mass root everything. Okay, they're opting to just pure single target Runecarver down, and then they'll probably pull him in when he's at like 10 or 20% HP. But, I mean, this is not necessarily the okay, I was going to say this is not very, effective. It's not very efficient, but they are ending up pulling on all those apprentices that we see Method and A cleave with the Guardian Elemental down. They're just pulling on top of Soren for the cleave instead. That's an interesting choice. Soren probably is the safer of the two mini-bosses to deal with because he does single target damage as well. But the thing is, you also gain the benefit of having the rune on the ground, which reduces your damage taken by, I believe, 75%. So even though you won't be able to interrupt any of the slams or interrupt any of the single target casts from Soren because the emissary is there, you just don't take any damage because you're standing on the rune and you're taking a quarter of the damage you should be.
Yeah. So I don't really dislike the strategy, what they're doing here, because you see Smog just constantly mass roots the mobs that they don't want to deal with. So what they're doing, the strategy is basically like this. So there's a trash pack. You have, let's say you have 3 mobs that have the same HP, and then you have 1 mob that has a little bit more, a little bit less. So what you're going to do is you have one of them just taunt off the mob that have the different kinds of HP. You just pull it on top of the rest of the mobs, and you just mass root them there. And you just keep mass rooting them until you're done with the trash, and then you shut them out off the aggro, right? So this way, with this mass root, you can just avoid a lot of mobs that you don't want to deal with. Just taunt them on top of the pack, mass root, and ignore, right? So I kind of like this strategy, but I'm not completely sure if this is worth it, considering the setup time. And then on top of that, even with this strategy that Abra is doing here, with pulling away mobs with different kinds of HP, they still just don't deal with bolstering properly. I feel like it just seemed like they're not mismanaging their focus targeting, their AoE things down way too fast. I'm not completely sure if they just deal with the bolstering well enough.
Yeah, Method NA just dealt with that 20 Tide Sage Initiate pull pretty clean. They had a little bit of bolstering at the end, which wasn't exactly perfect, but, they didn't end up having their tank go down. You could see Nerf was way away. He didn't want anything to deal with those mobs at all as well. It's kind of funny, whenever the mobs bolster, they increase in size, and the way those Initiates look with their hooded figures, it looks like, oh, I'm going to come get you. You better watch out. And they slowly walk as well because they walk the same speed even though they're a giant character model. So it's almost like they're RP walking. It's kind of funny to see. But yeah, Method NA dealing with the big bolstering pull pretty clean, and they're on to Gale Collarfay and Brother Ironhole. And once again, we're seeing this sort of spot on top of the rock where they don't have to worry about dealing with the tornadoes, and they can just freely kick the boss, and they don't have to worry about anything. Now, of course, the mechanic we're talking about that they're skipping here is whenever you kick Gale Collarfay, whenever you interrupt her ability, and she's at 100 energy, she'll spawn one of these tornadoes, and they kind of provide a problem in the fight where you have to make sure that you're you're moving around the room, but you're also dodging the frontal slam from Brother Ironhole, and you're also dodging the tornadoes. This is a big area of denial fight. So just standing on top of this rock completely takes the tornadoes out of the equation and makes the fight a lot easier. Now, the one kind of variation that we're seeing from most teams is whether or not they fully cleave the bosses down or if they just focus Gale Collarfay.
Yeah, that's something we've seen a big difference between teams. Some teams just... I don't dislike finishing off Gale Collarfay because you can pull on top other trash afterwards and just finish it off and cleave it down with Brother Ironhole afterwards. Now, if you played really efficiently and you cleave Brother Ironhole with Gale Collarfay, then yes, you're going to kill the boss faster, but you can't really afford to pull trash on top of it, right? Because if you have to deal with Gale Collarfay and trash on top and Brother Ironhole at the same time, it's just too much to handle, right? So I think both strategies are viable. I think they're also very similar in time gain, so it just depends on what you prefer on doing, in my opinion. Now, Abra seems to be cleaving a little bit more. You can see 68% on Brother Ironhole, while Method NA does choose to focus Faye a little bit more. So I assume Method NA is going to pull the 2 apprentices that are succeed in the corner on top of the boss afterwards.
Yeah, they'll probably get Brother Ironhole maybe a little bit lower first, but then, yeah, I imagine they'll do exactly what you're saying, since they're right there. I mean, it'd be kind of a shame to not pull them when they're right there, right? Right?
Right.
No, okay, they're not doing it. Okay, that's fine. They'll probably get it the next go around and cleave it down with the boss. But yeah, I mean, this is I think, both strategies are totally fine. I think they both work just fine. And if you do end up wanting to kill that trash at some point, it makes sense to cleave it with the boss when you have the ability to. So, I don't think at the end of the day either of them is necessarily better. It's just kind of, a preference of what you like doing.
Oh, okay. So do you think that Abra wants to one-face the boss with the DK? Do you think that's the reason behind it?
Ooh, they probably do more burst damage in the window than either Rogue or
Yeah,
Windwalker do, so
definitely.
it could be very close. We'll definitely be able to find out whenever they pull the boss, because they'll want to commit to doing it when they pull the boss. Like, normally we'll see teams pull a pack of eels in the first phase 1, and they'll get the boss to maybe like 75 or 80%. If they full-on commit to single targeting the boss down, and they get them like to 70% or lower, yeah, then they're definitely going for it. That'll be interesting to see. We'll have to keep an eye out for that.
And they could even pull the eels after the first intermission to give a shine more faster might stacks, right?
Ooh, yeah, they could do that.
Theory, so to increase the single target damage. But we'll see what they do later on, because it just seems weird to me to run a DK here specifically, just because it doesn't seem very efficient with the bolstering, and just in general it doesn't seem so good in this dungeon. So we'll see if there's a plan that they want to do later on. Either way, Method NA finished off Brother Ironhall and Gale Color Fate. They did Shadow Melt off the trash here and skipped a bunch, and now they're gonna have to deal with this bridge trash. Now there's some difficult packs that you can deal with this. Definitely things that we've seen go wrong, specifically for Method NA. It was with different affixes though, so they're set. But on this very tentacle pack, we did see Method NA, not sure if it was a full team wipe, but they had the tank go down and GB go down, I remember.
Okay, now I'm totally open to being corrected here, because it's happened at least 3 times today already. I feel like there's an entire cup that I missed where teams came up with new strategies at this point. I don't even know what year it is anymore. They just skipped all the enforcers. Have we seen a team skip the entire enforcer pool before?
I don't think so, actually.
I think that's new. I don't think we've seen that.
Yeah.
So that's, hopefully, correct me if I'm wrong again. I'm not always right, obviously, but I don't think we've seen a team completely skip the enforcer pulls before. So interesting new tech to see from Method NA, because that's a really dangerous pull. Like, whenever you talk about how you're setting up a dungeon, your number one priority is trying to do the dungeon as quickly as possible and as few pulls as possible, but also you want to try to do it in as few dangerous pulls as possible. And that enforcer pull, that was like putting the entire dungeon on one giant pressure point, and if you mess it up, you had to run back a long ways, and it was kind of overly dangerous for the pulls, for what they were doing and the mob count it was giving. So it's interesting to see them change up their pull style and actually pull more trash in sort of the rune carver area, instead of just trying to do that giant enforcer pull. I think that's a really interesting optimization they made.
Yeah, I like it. And they didn't even have to pull that much on the bridge either. They were definitely just doing more trash at the very start of the dungeon to be able to skip this enforcer pull. I like the adaptation from Method NA. Now, Abrakeydabra, again, having a death on a skip. Ashine, unfortunately, did not have the Shadow Melt ready, which was definitely a mistake, because there was nothing really they needed the Shadow Melt on before, so I'm not completely sure why it wasn't cooldown. Either way, another death. And this is like the name of the game for Abra, really. They have those constant deaths. Like, it might not be a full team wipe, but they just, lose one here on a skip, have to rest them up. It just costs them too much time. And this is why you can see Method NA being pretty far ahead at this point. They're 86% trash, they're fighting Lord Stormsong. So, and 0 deaths, for that matter, right? Method NA has a 100% clean run so far. And they're pretty fast. I mean, look at the time. 15 minutes in, and they're 80% on Lord Stormsong.
Oh, they're crushing the dungeon right now. Let's see if they get the Ancient Mindbender RNG too. That'd be pretty great if they don't get it here. We'll see. The rogues are going to cloak when the cast comes out, and if we don't see any Ancient Mindbenders come out, it means they got the RNG, and it looks like they got it. No Mindbender. The cloaks paid off. Do I only see... Wait.
Bless RNG.
Okay, both cloaks were used. I only saw one cloak out. I only saw one of the rogues use their cloak in-game, so they must have both gone out, and one was a little offset. So, yeah, a little good RNG from them. That means the next Ancient Mindbender will be able to instantly break themselves out with the orb, and that just lets the fight go even that much faster. So, bless RNG, good for them.
Yeah, so Abra, they're on the Dwellers now too, so they're in the same room, still pretty far behind, 50%, and a boss on a tyrannical setting is a lot of time, so Abra needs to do something if they want to catch up. At this point, I feel like even if they would one-face the last boss, that's not even going to be enough, right? Just because they're 20 seconds behind with death timers, and they're just behind in raw dungeon speed as well. So I don't think even one-facing the last boss would be enough at this point.
And that's the benefit of having all those extra orbs. Lady was able to pretty much instantly get himself down to like 52%, and then just let the residual rogue cleave break him out. He didn't want to actually get stunned coming out of the Ancient Mindbender, because if you do get hit by one of those purple orbs and you're not mind controlled, you get something like a 5-second stun, which is, you don't want to be stunned. You want to be doing damage. So yeah, letting the rogues cleave him out, letting the Tag cleave him out at that point, definitely the smart play. Good to see that from them. They'll have to actually do a little bit extra cleave to this next Ancient Mindbender should they get it, but it looks like they're almost at the point where they should be able to just beat it or just barely get it at the end, so they shouldn't have to worry about it. Getting it at 10% here. And yeah, I went on the rogue. He's just going to hop in the pool and let the pool deal damage to him. That's kind of the smart play as well. You'll see him slowly ticking down there. pool does about 5% per tick, and he'll hop out 5% left, eat one of those orbs to the face, and he should be out pretty clean. Just textbook mechanics from them. I would say textbook, almost practice cheat death from hitting too many orbs. Not the greatest, but that was a little spooky, but no, still has the cheat death available.
It was the Rip Mind. It was actually just unlucky.
Was it the Rip Mind?
Yeah.
Oh, that's...
Bad RNG,
okay.
bad RNG.
Bad RNG. They got the good RNG from the Mind Bender, bad RNG from the Rip Mind.
Yeah.
Didn't proc cheat death, so we're all good.
Yeah, there we go. Now, Abra, we're a little bit unfortunate. I mean, they only have one rogue, right? So for Method NA was 50-50 on who gets the Mind Bender, and for Abra, definitely, a little bit unlucky that he went on not a rogue, but it was Smuck after all. So Smuck, the best target to be hit by the Mind Bender, as long as if it doesn't go into the cloak, then it's Smuck, the second best target to get hit. So not that bad for Abra. Abra saving their Bloodlust for quite a while here. It did get back up while they were fighting the second boss, while they were fighting Gale Color Fae, and they were holding it this whole time, so I assume that they want to save it no matter what for the last boss. But Method NA, I mean, they're already on their way to the last boss. Hopefully no one is getting stunned. Doesn't seem like it, as they're all arriving here. They're doing this very similar pull that we've seen by many teams before, where they just pull these eels on top of the boss because they do not actually bolster.
And I think it's pretty safe to say that outside of like insane 5-buff RNG that they're not going to 2-phase this boss, or 1-phase this boss rather, because we've seen so many teams even attempt it on 17 and they weren't able to do it. With the extra added level onto the dungeon, it would take some pretty obscene single target DPS to actually pull it off. So, I mean, the boss is going to be here barely at 80%, 82% when he phases. And last week when we saw teams even attempt at 1-phasing it, getting into the single digits, they had to have the boss in the mid-70s to even have a shot. So Method NA looks like they're just committing to 2-phasing this boss. They're not going to have a chance at 1-phasing. I mean, we'll have to see. Abrakeydabra with the Unholy DK, they might have a shot at pulling it off, but it's going to be close.
Yeah, again, I mean, even at this point, if they manage to 1-phase, as long as Method NA does not have any more mistakes, like any more deaths or anything like that, they're still not gonna be ahead, right? So Abra, I'm not sure if this is their whole strategy, which I'm not completely sure yet, but if their whole strategy is, running a DK to be able to 1-phase the last boss, they have to rethink it, because it seems like it's not worth it. Even if they manage it now, they're just not going to be ahead. So just losing a lot of time with mismanaging bolstering, which, can definitely be the DK's fault. I've been talking about Abra not managing bolstering properly, and that just might be, it might be the DK. You can't really control the DK damage as well as you can control other damage dealers' damage. Now they are pulling the eels on top here on Abra's side, so not completely sure if they still want to run this strategy or not. This is something that we talked about earlier, which might not be as efficient for a single target boss DPS.
Like you mentioned, it's still good for the Unholy DK, and they are going to have the boss significantly lower than Method NA had it. They're already at 80%, and the boss hasn't even started casting it, so we'll have to see how low that gets. I think if it gets sub 75, they might have a shot with the Unholy DK. Yeah, it's 75 right now, 74, so that's really low. They might have a chance of 1-phasing this, and that'd be really great to see from them. That being said, Method NA is already so far ahead that I don't even know if it's going to matter at this point. I still kind of want to see it, just for me.
Yeah.
But Method NA, they're pretty committed to getting the second phase right now. They're already halfway through this phase. They're probably going to get the boss into the low 20s, high teens, and then they'll just have to deal with one more intermission, then they can finish the boss off afterwards. Abrakeydabra, however, they still have to deal with both the intermission phase, the 3 mobs on top, and then they'll probably end up pulling the rest of their trash count in the form of the eels on top of the boss, and that's when that Unholy DK is really going to have to do work. He'll have to pop off with those Festermite stacks, the Army of the Dead, all of his cooldowns with the Bloodlust. We're going to have to see some massive damage come out of him if they even want to have a chance.
Alright, so Method NA did proc their second intermission phase. Now, we're going to have to see what Abrakeydabra does here. They are actually dealing with the trash first. You cannot pull this trash on top of the boss, because this trash does bolster, the eels do not, but this trash does. So they want to finish off this trash and then pull the boss. Maybe Method NA actually just finishes off the boss and finishes the dungeon before Abra can even show what they can do with their Bloodlust. That would be very unfortunate, but yeah, Method NA, they should be very soon. They should be done soon with their mission, and then they only have the 20% left.
Yeah, I think they're going to finish the boss.
Yeah, we have to see
That's
it.
a shame. Yo, I want to see.
Can we just continue the
JB,
QB?
stop. I know you're watching the stream. JB, just wait. You won the dungeon. Just wait. I want to see this. Come on. Show me the burst damage, Ash.
There we go.
I want to see it. Show me the burst damage. We're gonna see that. We're gonna see their burst damage at the very least. We'll see what they could have done, like sort of an idea, but we're not.
Oh, so they're actually pulling the eels. They didn't interrupt the boss yet, so this is definitely their strategy.
This was the play,
yeah,
for
this
sure.
is 100% the play. They are going for the one phase. As you can see, the eels just coming in. You can see they were waiting a little bit. The Bloodlust being popped as well, and now we're probably gonna see a Shine just doing so much damage. But Method NA, they're done.
I think they had a chance. I mean, that boss is getting burned down.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, it would be too little too late because too many mistakes early on in the dungeon just put them too far behind.
And that's kind of the story of Abrakeydabra in this series as well. They had a good start onto that end. They just had too many of their own mistakes that just bogged down their run, and Method NA is ready to capitalize on it.
Yeah, what I wrote down for this match, it was competitive, and same for the whole entire series. Both of these teams seem like they're well evenly matched, whereas like just one or two minor mistakes that end up costing a team like 20 to 30 seconds.
They sink your ship?
Will sink their ship, unfortunately enough. Method NA does this very nice pull here with the Initiates and Windspeaker that we've seen from a couple teams, making sure that they sap those two apprentices off to the side to make sure that they do not get in combat. And then there's some differences between both of the teams as to what mini bosses they end up pulling so that they're able to get their count. Method NA elects to pull this Guardian Elemental. You can actually spell reflect the cast back onto the Guardian Elemental to do a lot of damage to it. Abrakeydabra here doing a little bit different. They end up pulling the Rune Carver and actually rooting all of the trash in the doorway, and then single target DPSing down the Rune Carver with all that trash rooted there, and then they'll eventually bring that trash in whenever they believe that the Rune Carver's at a reasonable amount of health that they can comfortably do that trash without it bolstering the Rune Carver and instantly killing them all with the Carve Flash. From then it was kind of neck and neck with Abrakeydabra having like a 30 to 45 second deficit, but then just a few mistakes, that 45 second deficit that they ended up having just ended up costing them the match, and Method NA ended up taking the whole entire series there.
They did well in just not having any deaths going throughout that matchup. So that will have Method NA moving on into that upper bracket. And this has always been that back and forth we keep on seeing between them and Abrakeydabra. And you know that it's got to feel good for them, Nagura, after losing to Abra previously.
Definitely, and you can see how well they're composed as well, because they had those mistakes in Freehold, right? And they were a little bit shaky in those dungeons before, especially in that siege. But now in this Shrine, just 0 deaths, 100% clean run, and really good strategy, so just very well composed by them.
Been no surprise to start seeing both Method teams coming up in the upper finals onto that one. So Abrakeydabra gets dropped down into the lower quarters, and they await the winner for tomorrow. Well, they'll be playing tomorrow, but they'll be waiting for these next two matches.